Hey guys, tonight we're going to slip quietly into the misty reaches of Scandinavia. The sea is cold and gray, like a pewter mirror. Wind brushes across your cheeks as you stand at the edge of a fjord. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, wet moss, and, oddly enough, cheese. Welcome to the Viking world. This isn't the version with horned helmets and epic battles. No flaming longships, no dramatic speeches in mead halls. This is the slower, smellier, and frankly far more useful Viking story, the one about dairy, specifically cheese. And you probably won't survive this. Not because of any battle axe or frostbite, but because the Viking version of cheese would, by modern standards, register somewhere between pungent and possibly haunted. It's an acquired taste, so naturally they treated it like treasure. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling extra cozy, comment where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little boat floats. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing outside a sod-roofed house where thick wooden beams brace the walls against howling winter winds. A woman in a heavy woolen tunic stirs something in a pot over a hearth. It smells like milk and herbs and possibly desperation. Behind her, hanging on wooden racks, are the shapes of small dried cheeses, round, lumpy, cracked like old pottery. Not pretty, but practical. This is where it all begins. Before the Viking Age even gets rolling, Norse communities survive on what they can grow, catch, or ferment. And fermented dairy is basically gold, except it smells like a goat's bad mood. You wander past a goat pen. The animals watch you suspiciously. Viking goats are small, scruffy, and deeply judgmental. Their milk isn't abundant, but it's rich. Add some rennet, probably from the stomach of a sheep, and let nature work its magic in the cold, dark corners of a wooden hut. A few weeks later, ta-da. Cheese, sort of. These early Viking cheeses weren't delicate brie or creamy cheddar. They were more like edible pebbles, dense, tart, sometimes smoked to survive winter, sometimes rubbed with ash, herbs, or even birch bark. One 9th century recipe apparently called for storing cheese inside a hollowed-out tree trunk. Viking Tupperware, if you will. The people making this cheese weren't just farmers. They were survivalists. You had to outwit nature just enough to stretch your food stores through endless nights of snow and ice. Cheese didn't spoil easily. It could be packed, traded, gifted, or stashed in secret. And while it's easy to laugh now, how important could dairy possibly be in a land of warriors and gods? Just imagine being snowed in for 6 months with only dried fish and turnips. That little wheel of cheese in your pouch? That's dinner. That's morale. That's status. Historians still argue whether these cheeses were considered delicacies or just default food. Some sagas suggest they were cherished, served at feasts and given as wedding gifts. Others imply they were more like Viking trail mix, always on hand, never really craved. There's one story, half remembered, half invented by an Icelandic poet, that mentions a young man impressing his sweetheart not with a poem or swordplay, but with a cheese so finely aged it had its own name. And yes, naming your cheese may be strange, but in the Viking world, it was practically romantic. The long nights passed with chores and quiet rituals. You can almost hear the sound of wooden churns scraping gently, the hiss of milk over flame, and the occasional goat bleat from outside. Not exactly high drama. But this is where Viking resilience takes shape. Not in war bands, but in quiet kitchens, turning milk into sustenance. You pass another farmstead. A boy no older than 12 balances a bucket of whey, slipping slightly on the frozen path. He grins at you. His teeth are uneven. His hands are red from the cold. But he's proud. He's carrying ingredients for his family's next batch of cheese. And in this world, that's practically a rite of passage. You glance out over the fjord again. The mist is thicker now. Seabirds wheel in the gray sky. Somewhere far off, the creak of a ship's mast and the distant thud of oars tells you that commerce is stirring. Soon, some of that hard-earned cheese will make its way down those waters. It will travel farther than you'd guess and trade for more than you'd imagine. But for now, you're just here, on the edge of a Viking homestead, where life is hard, food is earned, and the scent of dairy floats in the cold wind like a strange kind of hope. The sun has barely nudged above the mountains, but the Viking homestead is already alive with quiet motion. You shuffle your boots across a crust of frozen mud, breath misting in front of your face, and watch as a woman steps briskly into the goat pen with a wooden bucket in one hand and a slightly sour expression on her face. It's milking time. Milking goats at sunrise isn't the glamorous start to a hero's tale, but it's one of the most consistent daily rituals in the Norse world. And you're right in the middle of it, squinting through morning fog, standing among the bleats and bristles of a dozen stubborn goats who clearly aren't morning people either. She crouches, rests the bucket between her knees, and starts milking with practiced hands. The sound is rhythmic, liquid hitting wood, the occasional shuffle of hooves. You can smell damp fur, hay, and that unmistakable scent of fresh milk, warm, grassy, and slightly barn-adjacent. Vikings raised goats, sheep, and cows for milk, but goats had a special place. They were hardy, small, and more adaptable to the rocky landscapes and colder climates of Norway and Iceland. Plus, unlike cows, goats didn't mind climbing hills or sharing fields with rocks the size of Viking egos. Now here's the twist. Most Viking-age milk was consumed only indirectly. It spoiled quickly, especially in the summer. So families fermented it into skyr, a yogurt-like substance, churned it into butter, or, your favorite option, made cheese. Cheese that could travel, cheese that could last. Inside the farmhouse, someone else is already boiling fresh milk over the hearth. You duck through the doorway, careful not to whack your head on the low beam, and feel the warmth hit your face. The fire crackles. A smoky tang fills your nose. It's not cozy, it's survival. A ceramic pot simmers, the milk inside slowly thickening as a pouch of rennet, cut from a lamb's stomach, bobs in the liquid. This is where the magic begins. Rennet enzymes break the milk into curds and whey, and then, after cooling, the curds are pressed into rough molds made of wood or woven grass. Some cheeses are hung over the hearth to dry. Others are stored in birch bark boxes or even pressed into sacks and buried in cool earth to age. One rather bold method involved wrapping the cheese in animal skin and hanging it from the rafters like a meaty chandelier. Appetizing. Modern scholars debate whether Viking cheeses were always intentional. Was that smelly lump buried in a hut's corner meant to be gourmet? Or was it just forgotten curd gone rogue? Historians still argue whether this was an art form or a necessity-turned-tradition. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. And it wasn't just about flavor. Cheese had texture. Cheese had value. Some types were crumbly, meant to be added to porridge. Others were hard and portable, chewy like a dense protein bar, except less fun. A kind of survival cheese meant for travel and long days at sea. A young girl in the corner is pressing curds into a carved mold, humming softly to herself. The pattern on the mold. It's not decorative, it's a maker's mark. That way, if someone trades your cheese 6 villages away, your name still carries weight, literally and metaphorically. There's even mention in the Icelandic sagas of cheeses as family heirlooms, recipes handed down like swords. Imagine a grizzled old Viking telling his grandson, "This was your grandmother's brine-soaked wheel, aged under that very rock." Of course, not all cheese was created equal. Some were made from skimmed milk left over after making butter, cheaper, more common, less flavorful. Others, made from rich, full-fat milk, were for feasting or trade. A wheel of the good stuff could be the difference between having a partner for life or just another lonely winter. The ambient noise of the farmhouse lulls you, the scraping of spoons in wooden bowls, the creak of a churn handle, the occasional laugh or groan from someone turning cheese in the rafters. It's sleepy, domestic, oddly comforting. You could drift off right here, if not for the smell of boiling whey threatening to singe your nose hairs. You wander outside again, blinking in the pale light. It's brighter now, though the sun seems reluctant to climb too high. Along the edge of the farm, wheels of cheese sit on flat stones, drying in the wind. Birds eye them suspiciously. So does a neighbor's dog. Everyone wants a piece. In the distance, smoke curls from another homestead. You imagine similar scenes unfolding across the land. People with cold hands and red noses, turning milk into something durable, something that lasts. The sea wind has picked up, and with it comes the scent of salt, kelp, and a vague promise of adventure. You find yourself walking along a rutted trail that leads down from the farmstead toward the harbor, a humble cluster of boats, barrels, and damp ropes, all slightly canted to one side as if unsure about staying upright. A long ship rocks gently in the tide, its hull dark with tar and its sail furled like a sleeping bird. You step onto the dock, the boards slick with morning dew. The crew is already loading supplies, dried fish, bundles of wool, leather sacks of mead, and of course, cheese, wheels of the stuff, stacked and wrapped, some sealed with wax, others simply tied with twine and optimism. You catch the scent again, sharp, musty, and unmistakably dairy-forward. Viking cheese was never meant to blend in. It made its presence known. A tall man with wind-chapped cheeks grunts as he lifts a crate. Soft wheels for the south, hard for the islands, he mutters to no one in particular. You nod sagely, because that sounds like a real trade strategy. This right here is where cheese becomes more than food. It becomes currency. You board the longship, careful not to slip, and settle onto a coil of rope. As the crew prepares for departure, you begin to notice something. Everyone's gear includes food, personal bundles, rations, tucked-in chunks of dried cheese like edible worrystones. It's not just cargo, it's comfort. Historians still argue whether Viking cheese was a high-value trade item or simply filler between more exotic goods. But one thing is clear, it traveled far. From these humble harbors, Viking traders set sail for Ireland, the Scottish Isles, and even as far as the Frankish Empire. They brought timber, furs, iron, and, yes, cheese. In return, they might bring home silver, glass beads, spices, or a scolding from a distant bishop for smelling like fermented goat. You feel the boat lurch as oars dip into the water. The rhythm begins. Left, right, left, right. It's hypnotic. The fjord stretches out ahead like a silver vein, threading through steep cliffs that rise like frozen waves. You feel very small, and yet somehow important, like a curd in the great churn of history. Nearby, a younger sailor unwraps a chunk of cheese and offers you a bite. You hesitate, but he insists. The taste is bold, smoky, a little sour, a little sweet, and alarmingly chewy, like licking an old wooden spoon that's been near a campfire too long. You nod politely. Best batch this season, he says proudly. Lasted all the way from Bergen to Dublin. You're impressed, not so much with the flavor, but with the bragging rights. As the coast disappears behind you, one sailor starts humming a work song. Another carves a rune into the side of the mast. Time slides past. Seabirds follow, and under a canvas tarp, the cargo shifts ever so slightly. Dozens of wheels of cheese destined for unfamiliar markets and unfamiliar palates. Some of it will be traded in bustling markets. Others handed off quietly in backroom deals. One or two wheels might even end up as diplomatic gifts. Imagine a Viking emissary plopping a wheel of smoked goat cheese in front of a startled Carolingian noble. From our cows to your court, you imagine him saying with a grin. In Hedeby, the great trade city of the south, cheese was part of the mix. Archaeologists have uncovered tools and pottery that suggest both consumption and production of dairy products. Not glamorous, perhaps, but important. Even glamorous people get hungry, and nothing travels better than dried protein with a good rind. You close your eyes and listen to the water, the oars, the quiet murmur of voices. It's almost enough to lull you into a nap until one of the barrels rolls and knocks into a cheese crate with a dull thunk. The sailor winces. Not that one. That's the good batch. Apparently, even Vikings had quality control. Here's something odd. Some historical fragments suggest that cheese was occasionally used in trade with cultures that didn't produce dairy themselves. In the far north of Russia, or among certain nomadic groups, Viking traders may have introduced cheese like a traveling circus of fermented wonders. Imagine the first time someone bit into smoked sheep's milk and politely tried not to cry. As your ship rounds a headland, you see other vessels, some large, some lean, passing in the opposite direction. Flags flutter, shouts rise and fall. The Viking trade network is alive, and your cheesy cargo is just one small thread in the tapestry. By the time the sun starts to sink, you feel the fatigue of the day settle into your bones. The longship coasts toward a sheltered cove for the night. Campfires spring up. Fish sizzle on flat stones. And yes, someone pulls out another wheel of cheese, cracking it open like a treasure chest. You sit beside them watching sparks rise into the darkening sky. The cheese is crumbly this time, sharper, drier, a little less aggressive. You take a bite. It's not bad. Maybe you're getting used to it. The stars come out, scattered like salt across the velvet sky. You lie back against a sack of cargo, the creak of the ship and the whisper of wind wrapping around you like an old song. Tomorrow the cheese will trade hands. But tonight, it's dinner. And maybe a pillow, if you don't mind the smell. The morning mist clings to your sleeves as you wake to the muffled rustle of sails being raised. The camp is already breaking down. Ash from last night's fires still warm beneath the dew, a few embers blinking sleepily like red eyes. Around you, traders, warriors, and farmers alike are returning to the longship with practiced fluidity. There's cheese in a satchel beside you. You'd used it as a pillow. Not ideal. By now, you're days into your journey along the Viking trade routes, and the cargo has become more than just provisions. It's reputation. What sits beneath the deck, barrels of dried fish, sacks of salt, tightly wrapped wheels of goat cheese, represents a homestead skill, a family's pride, and occasionally a secret weapon in negotiations. As the ship glides toward the coast of a foreign land, you're told it's the Kingdom of Northumbria, you feel that shift in mood that comes with entering someone else's territory. Traders stand straighter, helmets get a little shinier, someone discreetly checks the cheese for mold. The port is busy. You dock beside boats from the continent, sleek things with painted shields and brightly dyed sails. The air is full of calls in languages you half understand. Old English, Old Norse, a little Latin, a lot of shouting. And what do you bring to this cultural exchange? A wheel of pungent, home-smoked cheese wrapped in birch bark. Naturally, you follow the crew into the market square, where goods spill across stalls like a harvest exploded. Beads from Byzantium, spices from the Middle East, furs, axes, barrels of mead. It's chaotic and loud and a little magical. And then there's the dairy stall. Yes, even in this melting pot of trade, someone is selling local Northumbrian cheese. It's soft, pale, packed in straw baskets. It smells faintly of herbs and regret. A comparison is inevitable. Your ship's cheese, harder, darker, aged for travel, is laid on the table beside the local offering. Traders circle, sniffing, poking. One brave man bites off a corner and chews like a goat testing a fence post. And then comes the barter. Cheese, it turns out, is flexible. In one corner of the market, a single large wheel is traded for 2 bolts of fine wool. In another, it sweetens a deal for iron tools. And in a particularly memorable moment, one haggard man uses a smaller wheel to secure a rather saucy-looking painted brooch from a traveling craftsman. Dairy diplomacy at its finest. Historians still argue whether Viking cheese ever reached elite hands, whether any bishop, king, or court lady ever chewed politely through a slice and smiled with their eyes closed. But archaeological digs near former Viking trading sites have uncovered bits of aged dairy residue in clay vessels. Evidence that cheese, in one form or another, made the journey. You slip away from the market noise and wander toward a quieter street. The buildings here are half-timbered, narrow, and leaning at angles that suggest they don't get along. A baker is pulling flat loaves from a wood oven, and the smell is heavenly. You catch a whiff of toasted cheese too. Someone nearby is cooking. In a small tavern, Just beyond the bakery, you find a merchant from Francia eating a kind of onion soup thickened with melted curds. You nod to him, and he gestures at the bench beside him. "You look like you've been on the water," he says. You confirm, and before long, you're swapping stories. Turns out he's been to Hedeby too. Tried the cheese, didn't lose his teeth. Called it vigorously aromatic. You share a laugh, and then he says something curious. That in his travels, he's noticed each region treats cheese not just as food, but as identity. In France, it's refinement. In England, sustenance. Among Vikings, endurance. A cheese that survives a month at sea with only a bit of mold is a triumph. A metaphor even. You thank him and leave the tavern, now full of the warm fuzziness that comes from both good conversation and not having to eat fish again. Back on the ship, the crew is loading new cargo. Iron tools, glass beads, jars of foreign spices, and yes, more cheese, local this time. The wheel you traded away has been replaced by a strange, sticky variety wrapped in waxed linen. You poke it suspiciously. Someone jokes that if your home village doesn't like it, you can always feed it to the goats. The sun sets behind you, casting the sails in a golden glow. You lie down on a new coil of rope and breathe deep. The air smells of seaweed, old wood, and just a hint of brine dairy. Sleep comes gently, like tide over stone. You wake to rain, soft, steady, and annoyingly confident in its ability to soak everything. The long ship pitches slightly as waves slap its hull, and above you, a gray sky hangs low like a damp wool blanket. But the crew is in good spirits. You've rounded the southern tip of Britain, and now you're sailing along unfamiliar coastlines toward the Frankish territories. Modern-day France, though no one's calling it that yet. The rivers here are wide, muddy, and teeming with trade. Somewhere along the Seine, you're told, lies a village with a particular fondness for Viking cheese. Yes, really. The Frankish markets are different. Not louder, but more deliberate. Where the Northumbrian ports felt chaotic and weather-beaten, the Frankish ones are lined with orderly stalls, stone buildings, and people who wear hats that look slightly too serious for their heads. You dock near Rouen, or what will one day become Rouen, and are immediately hit with the mingling sense of lavender, wet dogs, and warm butter. You disembark with your cargo. The cheese is still intact, though it now hums gently with a tang only prolonged travel can create. The traders here are more skeptical. They sniff with the intensity of cats, tap wheels with their knuckles, and occasionally mutter phrases in Latin that you suspect are not compliments. But then something delightful happens. A local taverner, a woman in a dark blue apron with arms like rolling pins, takes a sample and hums appreciatively. She offers a trade, 2 wheels of local brie for your hard-smoked goat's milk rounds, a swap of softness for firmness, a cheese détente. She invites you to her kitchen, where things only get stranger. Her brie is served warm, with garlic and wine. It melts into bread like a river into sand. Your cheese, by contrast, is cubed and tossed into a dish with dried fruits and roasted nuts. A northern novelty, she calls it. And there you are, sitting in a smoky kitchen, eating cheese from 2 worlds, while a fat dog snores by the fire, and rain taps the windows like a nosy ghost. It's cozy, it's odd, it's trading at its most edible. Historians still debate whether Viking cheese ever truly influenced continental cheese culture. Most suggest it was too rustic, too pungent, to leave a lasting mark. But there's speculation, vague references in monastery texts about dark Rhines from the north, and one overly dramatic account of a feast gone wrong due to a fermented raider's lump. So, maybe? Back at the harbor, the rest of the crew is loading Frankish luxuries, cloth dyed in shades you've never seen before, delicate glass flasks shaped like teardrops, even a few barrels of wine that slosh with an elegance your mead could never pull off. And still, there's cheese, soft-rinded, sweet-smelling, incredibly squishy cheese, packed carefully into crates lined with straw. One sailor asks if you can really trust a cheese that doesn't crack when you drop it. You laugh, but then quietly hope no one tests that theory on deck. As your ship drifts away from the dock, the city fades into mist behind you. Your stomach is full, your pockets a little heavier, and your cargo considerably smellier. You've added new textures to your cheese repertoire, and perhaps even to your dreams, because that night, you dream of wheels spinning on rivers, of dogs barking at butter, and of garlic-scented air floating through time. Morning brings a calm sea and a quieter crew. The rhythm of travel is settling in. You've become familiar with the way the ship rocks, the call of seabirds, the slow rot of provisions, and the endless presence of cheese, always near, always slightly judgmental in its smell. You take a moment to study the cargo. Viking cheese from home, Brie from France. Somewhere in the middle, a rogue wheel of mystery origin, round, waxed, and completely unlabeled. You ask about it. The captain shrugs. It's either going to be amazing or a mistake, he says. Bit like life. You continue down the river, passing dense forests and low hills. You see small settlements, clusters of stone houses, children chasing geese, farmers bent over root vegetables. You wonder if any of them are waiting for cheese, if they've ever tasted yours, if they'd like it. Cheese, it turns out, is a weird little ambassador. It carries stories, scents, Moldavian, and the occasional hard lesson in refrigeration, or the lack thereof. As the ship rounds another bend, you spot a monastery. White walls, steep roofs, bells pealing softly in the distance. You've heard tales of monks trading with Viking merchants, sometimes for fish, sometimes for ink, and yes, sometimes, when the abbot is feeling adventurous, for cheese. You dock near the abbey. A few monks wander down to meet you, robes flapping in the breeze. One of them eyes the cargo, sniffs once, and smiles. Smells like the north, he says, and it sounds almost fond. Later, after a polite exchange of goods and blessings, you leave a small will behind. A gift, or perhaps a bribe, depending on how strict their dietary rules are. In return, you're given a loaf of honey bread and a single perfect apple. It's not exactly a fair trade, but that's cheese for you. Unpredictable, persistent, oddly sacred in a world of shifting power and silent monasteries. You lie back again on your now permanent bedroll beside the crates and close your eyes as the ship pushes onward. The rivers are widening, the days are passing, and the cheese is evolving. The river widens and the air shifts. You can taste it, warmer, heavier, with the faintest scent of cardamom drifting from distant markets. Your long ship leaves the Frankish lands behind, veering southeast into unfamiliar territory. Now you're approaching the edge of the Holy Roman Empire, loosely defined, stubbornly bureaucratic, and full of people who pronounce their R's like they're chewing them. Your destination is Regensburg, a key node along the old Amber Road, nestled by the Danube, a place where laws are long, sausages are longer, and the people are deeply suspicious of food that's been on boats. You dock without ceremony. The harbor is busy with flat-bottom riverboats, crates of pewterware, and monks bickering about grain tariffs. Your crew sets up shop beside a salt merchant and a group of Slavic traders hawking wooden icons and fermented cabbage. The cheese goes on display again, yours next to the French wheels, next to the sticky wax-covered mystery round that no one has dared open yet. Within an hour, a local cheesemonger ambles over. He pokes your cheese with a long stick, mutters in Bavarian, and then nibbles a corner as if preparing to denounce heresy. He nods slowly, squints at the sky, and finally offers you an entire jug of something that smells like horseradish and regret. The trade is accepted. You learn quickly that Central European cheese culture is thriving. Soft curds, hard wheels, aged rinds. But what's truly fascinating is their cheese etiquette. They slice vertically, never horizontally. They believe eating cheese before noon invites melancholy. And, this one's a gem, some monasteries forbid strong cheese during Lent, classifying it as too stimulating. Naturally, Viking cheese is both vertical slice defiant and Lent inappropriate, a rebel in dairy form. Historians still argue whether the Norse brought cheese innovation or simply annoyed the locals with their stubborn molds. Records are patchy, but there's a curious charter from the 10th century listing foreign herders' cheese as an acceptable tax substitute in the region. Could be yours. After a week in Regensburg, your crew has traded half the cargo. You've picked up new goods, bronze tools, embroidered belts, and a miniature harp someone insists is good luck. You've also picked up a cold, likely from sleeping near cheese that's begun whispering in your dreams. One night you attend a merchant's supper. It's candlelit, with benches carved from black walnut and bowls of thick stew steaming like little volcanoes. At the center of the table sits a ceremonial cheese, round, bright orange, carved with an eagle. It's not for eating, it's for display, a dairy trophy. You can't help but chuckle. Your cheese would never pose like that. It would creak when you cut it, glare at guests, and probably leak. The meal continues. You trade stories of sea monsters, northern lights, storms that sound like drum beats. The locals listen politely, then share tales of river spirits, haunted forests, and a goose that once outwitted a bishop. It's not a competition, but you're pretty sure the goose wins. Outside, the rain starts again, gentle, persistent, vaguely judgmental. You walk back to the harbor, your cloak heavy with moisture and your boots full of regret. The ship smells like wet rope and smoked fish. You crawl beneath a tarp beside the cargo and fall asleep with your head resting on a half-empty sack of lentils. In your dream, you're in a vast cathedral made entirely of cheese. The walls drip brie, the pews are aged cheddar, and the altar is, of course, a Viking wheel, slightly cracked and faintly humming. You wake laughing. The next morning, the ship sets sail once more. The Danube carries you eastward now, toward the edge of Slavic lands and the fringes of the known world. You munch on a crust of bread, spread with local cheese, surprisingly creamy, suspiciously pink, and watch as the forest thins and strange birds circle overhead. Your captain points toward the shore. That village trades in smoked salt and fire pottery, he says. They love hard cheese. Can't get enough. You glance at your dwindling stores. The original Viking wheels are few now. One is cracked. One has grown something that might be sapient. But they're yours and they've traveled far. You wonder, will these wheels become legends too? Maybe someone here will pass down a story of a trader with sea-colored eyes and cheese that could stop a bear in its tracks. You smile. The Danube gives way to tributaries now, smaller arteries feeding into the Balkans like veins into a sleeping arm. You glide through green hills and sun-drenched valleys where time seems to slow down, and the sky stretches in quiet, unbothered blues. Here, in the Slavic lands, what will someday be part of modern-day Serbia, Bulgaria, and Romania, life follows older rhythms. The people don't rush. The oxen are impressively stoic. And the cheese? Well, it's oddly philosophical. You dock at a riverside village where the homes are roofed in thatch and ringed with small herb gardens. Smoke curls gently from chimneys. Children herd goats with sticks taller than themselves. And someone has strung bells between trees. Not for decoration, you're told, but to keep cheese thieves away. That's right, cheese theft. It's a thing here. Your crew unloads what's left of the trade goods. Among the wares, beads, iron nails, fur cloaks, and of course, a few remaining wheels of your Viking cheese. By now the rind is leathery, and the scent is, let's say, bold. You cut a wedge and air it discreetly beside the river while pretending not to notice the flies doing reconnaissance laps. The villagers approach slowly. One of them, an elderly woman with a cane carved to look like a serpent, steps forward. She examines the cheese, sniffs once, then gestures to a stone oven tucked beneath a wooden lean-to. Minutes later, she returns with a dish that will forever change how you think about fusion cuisine. It's called banitsa, flaky pastry, eggs, herbs, and now apparently just a little touch of Viking cheese, crumbled in like a rebellious afterthought. It's incredible. Salty, rich, with a kick like a goat that resents dairy products on principle. The old woman watches you chew with a knowing smirk. Cheese should fight a little, she says. You nod gravely. You have no idea what that means, but it feels like something a monk might embroider on a wall hanging. Later, while your captain negotiates for woven wool and pickled garlic, you explore the village. There's a ritual happening near the river. Young women dancing in a circle while holding bundles of herbs. One of them explains with a laugh that it's for fertility, rain, and good cheese curds. You don't question it. Historians still debate the extent of Viking influence in the Balkans. Some argue the Norse never made it this far inland. Others point to a few Slavic texts that mention longboats from the Foglands bringing metal, fur, and milkstone. The translation of milkstone is sketchy. It might be soapstone used to store dairy, or more poetically, just a really hard cheese. Your cheese. You like that. You sit by the fire that night, watching sparks rise into the treetops. One of the locals offers you a pipe carved from plum wood and filled with something sweet that makes your thoughts fuzzy and warm. The stars are brilliant overhead, scattered across the sky like oats on a baker's table. You think about all the hands that have passed your cheese along. Monks, merchants, kitchen workers, curious farmers. Somewhere behind you, someone accidentally steps on a rind and yells. You smile. Legacy is complicated. The next morning, you're gifted a strange new item, a cheese bell. It's a clay dome, painted with swirling red lines, meant to sit over a wedge of cheese to keep the bad spirits from licking it. Whether literal or metaphorical, you take it. You also take a goat-shaped cheese mold, a bag of walnuts, and a recipe scrawled in coal on birch bark. You leave behind 3 small wheels and the wax-covered mystery cheese, which you suspect is cursed, sentient, or both. As you pull away from the shore, a child waves a cloth at you, possibly a goodbye, possibly an attempt to fan the air clear of that final cheese's aroma. You wave back. The Danube curves east and the scenery changes again. The forest thins. The hills flatten. Birds you don't recognize soar above fields of rye. In the distance, faint mountains loom like blue ghosts on the horizon. Your ship glides onward. You're nearly at the Black Sea now, and everything feels wider, deeper, older. Your cheese has changed too. There are only a few wheels left now, tucked in straw and whispering softly of home. You wonder where they'll end up, what kitchens they'll warm, what dishes they'll sneak into when no one's looking. You fall asleep that night to the gentle lapping of water against the hull and the faint, strangely comforting scent of aged goat rind and fire-baked pastry. Dreams come easy. They always do when your cargo has character. Salt air now, a subtle shift in the breeze like the sea clearing its throat. After so many riverbanks and border towns, the Black Sea opens before you like an ancient mirror, dark, endless, and oddly calm. It's both thrilling and slightly unnerving, like stepping into a ballroom full of strangers who all somehow know your middle name. The Viking longship creaks in protest as it leaves the comfort of inland waters and skims along the coast toward Chersonesus, what you might call Crimea today. At the time, it's a bustling outpost of the Byzantine Empire, a place where Greek, Slavic, Armenian, and Turkic cultures bump elbows in crowded bazaars and debate philosophy over fermented turnip drinks. You disembark at a dock carved from stone. The port smells of resin, drying fish, and freshly plucked lemons. Orthodox priests glide past in embroidered robes, traders argue about amphora weight, and somewhere, a camel makes a very dramatic noise of protest. You're definitely not in Scandinavia anymore. Chersonesus is a major exchange point. Silk from the east, silver from the west, furs from the north. And here, as improbable as it may seem, cheese is still a viable trade chip. Not just any cheese, though. The Byzantines are discerning. They like their dairy complicated, braided, brined, smoked over cherry wood, and occasionally buried in clay jars with herbs that have gone extinct twice. Still, your Viking cheese draws attention. Not from nobles or priests, mind you, but from sailors, dock workers, street cooks, the people who know how to stretch a coin and feed a crowd with crusts and cleverness. One of them, a wiry woman who sells grilled flatbread from a brazier mounted on a cart, takes a nibble, nods, and immediately offers to buy half a wheel in exchange for 10 skewers of lamb and a slightly suspicious jug of wine. The deal is sealed with a handshake so firm you're briefly worried about your wrist bones. You eat in the shade of a fig tree, watching the harbor bustle and the sun trace slow arcs across weathered tile roofs. The lamb is spicy. The wine is probably not entirely wine, but the bread is excellent, and your cheese melts into it like it finally understands its purpose. Nearby, a pair of scholars are arguing about Galen's views on dairy and digestion. One insists cheese slows the spirit, the other swears it fuels the blood. Neither of them notices you listening, chewing slowly, and wondering which part of you feels faster. Historians still argue whether the Norse in Chersonesus were simply traders or if they occasionally moonlighted as mercenaries or bodyguards for wealthy locals. There are records, fragmented, water-stained, that mention axe folk with salted wheels. Whether that was praise, fear, or indigestion is unclear. That evening, you're invited to a household feast. Not grand, but generous. The host is an Armenian scribe who collects rare ink and even rarer cheeses. When he hears what you brought, he lights up like a torch and disappears into a side room, returning moments later with a clay jar sealed in beeswax. He opens it. The smell is aggressive, but in a compelling way, like an old book with opinions. You match him wedge for wedge, your Viking wheel against his black garlic goat brick. He grins, claps you on the back, and declares the meal a meeting of barbarian dairy gods. The conversation turns to trade routes, sea storms, border taxes, and once again, cheese. He tells you of a man in Trebizond who claims to make cheese that sings when you slice it. You file that away, somewhere between disbelief and curiosity. As night falls, you step outside. The moon is a perfect silver coin above the sea, and the stars sparkle like they've just been polished. A warm breeze rises, scented faintly with bay leaves and citrus. You lie back on a woolen cloak, using a sack of dried chickpeas as a pillow. A wheel of cheese rests beside you. Not as fresh as when it left the fjords, but seasoned now, traveled, wiser. It's hard not to feel the same way. You dream of a cheese market high in the mountains, where clouds part like curtains, and each wheel is judged by a panel of solemn monks who all look suspiciously like your crew. One of them winks and hands you a gold medal made of butter. You wake with a smile. Chersonesus fades behind you as the ship pulls out once more. The sea is glassy, the crew humming as they coil ropes and swab decks. Your next stop lies deeper along the coast, in lands where language shifts every few miles, and cheese is both food and superstition. You lean on the rail, watching the spray rise and fall, and think about that black garlic brick. You wonder if your cheese will be remembered in places like this, not for its strength or its scent, but for where it went, and how far it still might go. The sun rises slowly as you near the coast of the Caucasus, a place where mountains reach for the sky like ancient fingers, and the air smells of pine and something faintly nutty, perhaps the promise of more cheese. You slip quietly into a small harbor tucked beneath a cliff, greeted by fishermen with nets heavy and eyes curious. This is the land of the Alans, a proud people known for their horsemanship and their stubborn love of traditions. They welcome your arrival with cautious smiles and invitations to share bread and cheese around their fires. You quickly learn that cheese here is less about wheels and more about rituals. It's wrapped in leaves, pressed in wooden molds, and aged in caves that echo with dripping water and whispered stories. You're handed a small, dense piece that's salty and smoky, far from your Viking familiarities, but no less compelling. At a communal feast, you notice something odd. Instead of passing dishes in a circle, the Alans have a custom of offering cheese as a gift before any meal begins, a symbol of friendship and trust. Declining is considered rude, or worse, suspicious. You nibble politely, feeling the sharp tang settle on your tongue as you listen to tales of mountain battles, lost horses, and a legendary warrior who supposedly carried cheese wheels as armor padding. Historians still debate whether this warrior was real or just a metaphor for resilience. The next day, you visit a local cheese cave. It's cool and damp, the walls lined with centuries-old wheels resting on wooden shelves. The air is thick with the scent of earth and fermentation. A cheesemaker shows you how they add wild herbs to the curds, giving each wheel a unique aroma and flavor profile. You try your hand at shaping the curds, your fingers sticky and cold. It's a humbling experience. Cheese here is not just food, but art and tradition rolled into one. Before you leave, you barter a wheel of Viking cheese for a bag of dried herbs and a leather pouch filled with fresh mountain honey. The merchant winks and says, "This will make your cheese dance." You're not sure if he means it literally. That night, your ship sails under a blanket of stars. The waves whisper secrets, and the wind carries the scent of pine and honey. Your cheese wheels rest in straw, their rinds toughened by travel and time. You wonder how many hands have held these cheeses before yours. How many meals have they graced? How many dreams have been sweetened by their salt and tang? The journey continues, winding through cultures, landscapes, and stories as rich and varied as the cheeses themselves. And you, traveler, are at the heart of it all. The coast fades behind you, and soon your ship navigates the jagged edges of the Caucasus Mountains, where the landscape shifts from pine-scented hills to rocky crags dotted with ancient fortresses. You find yourself approaching the kingdom of Alania, a crossroads where east meets west, and dairy traditions are as diverse as the languages spoken here. You dock at a bustling trade town, its marketplace alive with merchants hawking silks, spices, and of course cheese. Here the variety is staggering. Soft, tangy cheeses wrapped in grape leaves, dense, crumbly ones smoked over juniper, and a rare blue cheese said to be guarded by mountain spirits. The locals call it Kobistan, and you're invited to taste it at a communal feast. The cheese is pungent but oddly sweet, the mold threading through it like veins of silver and marble. One elder insists the blue veins are the breath of the mountains themselves, lending the cheese its unique character. As you savor the unfamiliar flavors, a storyteller spins tales of caravans that traverse the silk routes, carrying precious cheeses alongside silk and spices. Historians still debate whether these routes brought dairy products as prized trade goods or simply as sustenance for weary travelers. Your attention shifts to a young woman sitting nearby, weaving a basket from willow branches. She explains that cheese here is not just food, but a symbol of hospitality and resilience. To offer cheese is to share a piece of one's soul. You recall the cheese bell from the Balkans and the singing cheese of Chersonesus, each tradition strange and beautiful in its own way. That night, the town fills with music and laughter. You join a circle of locals, passing around a wheel of Viking cheese alongside their own specialties. The flavors mingle like old friends, each bite a bridge between cultures. Under a sky dotted with stars, you feel the weight of history in your hands, a tangible link to centuries of trade, travel, and taste. Your journey continues, and with every mile, every bite, you discover that cheese is more than nourishment. It's a story, a memory, a quiet companion on the road to sleep. As your ship edges eastward along the Caspian Sea, the landscape gradually softens into sprawling steppes dotted with wildflowers and grazing herds. You find yourself entering the realm of the Khazars, a fascinating and enigmatic people whose empire once stretched from the Volga River to the Caucasus Mountains. Here, cheese plays a surprisingly important role, not just as food, but as currency and cultural symbol. You watch merchants barter wheels of cheese for pelts, grain, and intricate silverwork. The transactions smooth and practiced under the dappled sunlight of the market square. A local dairy farmer invites you to witness their cheese-making process, which involves aging cheese in animal skins, a method that preserves flavor and protects the precious wheels from pests. You're offered a sample, a crumbly, tangy cheese with a hint of smoky earthiness. It's unlike anything you've tasted before, a true product of the steppes' wild and untamed spirit. You learn that Khazar cheese was highly prized across Eurasia, often gifted as tribute to neighboring rulers and warriors. It's said that a good cheese could soften the hardest of hearts, a claim historians still debate with a mix of skepticism and fondness. Later, as dusk falls, you gather around a fire with your hosts, sharing stories and cheese beneath an expansive sky painted with stars. They tell of ancient legends, one about a mythical cheese that could grant the power of speech to animals, a tale that leaves you both amused and contemplative. You reflect on the journey so far, from Viking fjords to Byzantine ports, from Slavic villages to the mysterious Khazar steppes. Each stop has added layers to the story of cheese, a journey as complex and rich as the flavors themselves. The night air cools, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. You feel a quiet contentment settle over you, the kind that comes from knowing you're part of a much larger story, one woven through time and across lands. Your ship rocks gently on the Caspian waves as you prepare for the next leg of your voyage, ready to discover what other secrets this curious cargo might reveal. The dawn breaks cool and misty as your ship rounds the Caspian's eastern shore, entering lands where the steppe meets the desert and the scent of sagebrush mingles with a faint trace of salty sea air. Here lie the ancient silk routes, arteries of trade pulsing through Central Asia, carrying not only silk and spices, but also, surprisingly, cheese. Your arrival in the city of Merv, a sprawling oasis city known for its grand bazaars and diverse peoples, introduces you to a melting pot of cultures. Persians, Turks, Arabs, and nomadic tribes all mingling beneath the shade of fruit trees and awnings. Cheese here is a prized commodity, often preserved in thick skins or dried into hard slabs, perfect for long journeys across deserts and mountains. You watch as merchants unwrap these dense blocks, slicing thin shavings to sprinkle over flatbreads or steep into strong, black tea. A local dairyman offers you a taste of kurit, a dried cheese ball that looks unassuming but bursts with tangy flavor. He explains how it's made by straining yogurt, salting it, then drying it for months, perfect for travelers needing sustenance without spoilage. You're told stories of caravan leaders who considered their cheese stocks almost as precious as their camels, relying on these preserved dairy goods to sustain their teams through sandstorms and harsh mountain passes. Historians still argue whether such cheeses were trade goods themselves or mainly survival rations. But the lines blur when a slab of kurut is passed around a campfire and stories are shared. At the market, you spot traders bartering Viking cheese for saffron and rare spices, proof that your journey's cargo has reached even these distant lands. As night falls, the call to prayer echoes softly across the city, mixing with the hum of conversation and the occasional clatter of hooves on cobblestones. You sit beneath a canopy of lanterns, savoring the mix of flavors, sounds, and scents. A sensory mosaic as rich as the history woven through the silk roots. With your leather pouch heavier and your heart lighter, you prepare to continue, curious what other ancient customs this long road will reveal. You set sail once more, leaving the bustling markets of Merv behind as your ship glides along the Caspian's shimmering edge. The landscape changes again, turning into arid plains where caravans once trudged through sand and dust, their riders cloaked in layered fabrics against the sun. Your destination is the ancient city of Samarkand, a jewel of the Silk Road, where Persian architecture meets nomadic heritage, and every corner holds whispers of trade and travelers long past. The streets are alive with merchants calling out their wares, spices, silk, pottery, and nestled among these treasures, cheese finds its place as both nourishment and barter. You wander into a modest dairy shop where the air is heavy with the scent of fermented milk and herbs. The cheesemaker here uses techniques passed down for generations, aging cheese in underground cellars cooled by natural springs. You're handed a piece of chaka, a thick, creamy cheese often spread on bread or stirred into hearty soups. Local legends suggest that the finest cheeses were once blessed by Sufi mystics who believed dairy held spiritual power, an idea that scholars continue to discuss with a mixture of fascination and skepticism. Over tea, the cheesemaker shares stories of how nomadic tribes prized cheese not just for sustenance, but as a gift of goodwill, offering it to guests as a symbol of trust and respect, a tradition you've seen echoed along your journey. You reflect on how cheese connects these distant cultures, acting as a silent ambassador in markets, feasts, and humble hearths. As evening falls, the call to prayer reverberates once again, mingling with the soft music of a nearby lute player. You savor the creamy cheese, the gentle melody, and the feeling of belonging to a vast ancient story that stretches across deserts and seas. Your thoughts drift like the desert winds, and you wonder how many travelers have found comfort in a simple piece of cheese after a long day on the road. You tuck these reflections away as your ship prepares to head toward new horizons, your journey far from over. The journey takes you now beyond the desert's edge to the fertile valleys of the Indus, where the ancient city of Harappa once thrived, though now only ruins remain, silent witnesses to civilizations lost beneath time's sands. You tread carefully among crumbled bricks and overgrown paths, imagining the bustling markets and dairy farms that once supplied this urban heart. Here, evidence suggests that early cheesemaking was already well established thousands of years ago, a testament to humanity's enduring relationship with milk and fermentation. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient strainers believed to have been used to separate curds from whey, hinting that cheese was more than a simple food. It was a crafted delicacy. You find yourself picturing nomadic herders grazing their cattle on lush riverbanks, turning milk into cheese to sustain their families, and traders venturing along the Indus River, carrying these tasty provisions to far-flung lands. The delicate balance of salt, heat, and time in early cheesemaking reflects a subtle art, one that historians still debate. Was cheese a luxury for city elites or everyday fare for farmers and traders? The truth, as always, is likely a blend of both. You pause to imagine how these early cheeses tasted: tangy, slightly sour, perhaps with the aroma of river herbs, and how they would have complemented the simple flatbreads and lentils of the day. Nearby, you spot wild mustard and coriander, herbs that might have been added to flavor these ancient cheeses. It strikes you how these early culinary experiments laid the groundwork for centuries of dairy delights. As dusk falls, you feel a quiet reverence for the hands that first crafted cheese here, transforming humble milk into nourishment, culture, and tradition. The ruins grow dim in twilight, and you ready yourself to sail toward your final destination, an island in the northern seas where the Vikings first set out on their cheese-laden adventures. The sea air is crisp as your ship nears the rugged coasts of Scandinavia, the familiar fjords rising sharply from cold waters like giant stone guardians. The wind carries the faint scent of salt, pine, and that unmistakable aroma of aging cheese, a comforting reminder of your journey's beginning. You step ashore in a small Viking settlement, where longhouses cluster near the water and smoke curls from peat fires. Here, cheese is woven into daily life, from breakfast tables to festive feasts. It's a staple born from necessity, but also a source of pride, each family's recipe a carefully guarded secret. You recall the tales of Viking traders who carried cheese as valuable cargo across stormy seas, trading it for silk, spices, and silver in distant lands. Historians still debate how far Viking cheese traveled and how much it influenced other cultures' dairy traditions. As evening falls, you join a gathering where stories of gods and heroes mingle with laughter and the clinking of wooden cups. Someone raises a wheel of cheese, and a toast is made to journeys past and those yet to come. You feel a gentle calm settle over you, the rhythmic sound of waves lapping against the shore blending with the warmth of shared company. Your voyage through time and taste comes to a close, but the stories carried by these humble wheels of cheese will linger in your mind, softening edges and sweetening dreams. You lie back, the day's adventures melting away, ready to drift into a restful sleep.